Hello, friends. My name's Tami Simon, and I'm the founder of Sounds True, and I want to welcome you to the Sounds True podcast, Insights at the Edge. I also want to take a moment to introduce you to Sounds True's new membership community and digital platform. It's called Sounds True One. Sounds True One features original, premium, transformational docuseries, community events, classes to start your day and relax in the evening, special weekly live shows, including a video version of Insights at the Edge with an after-show community question and answer session with featured guests. I hope you'll come join us, explore, come have fun with us, and connect with others. You can learn more at join.soundstrue.com. I also want to take a moment and introduce you to the Sounds True Foundation, our nonprofit that creates equitable access to transformational tools and teachings. You can learn more at soundstruefoundation.org. And in advance, thank you for your support. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Nanci Danison. Nanci is a former lawyer and litigator in a prestigious 270 attorney law firm who had a profound near-death experience in 1994 while undergoing a pre-surgical procedure. You could call this near-death experience she had, to distinguish it from what are sometimes called threshold near-death experiences, a deep afterlife experience. And we're going to hear more about that. Nanci has written about her deep afterlife experience in a series of books called Backwards, Returning to Our Source for Answers, and then a follow-up, Backwards Guidebook and Backwards Belief, along with two other books, Answers from the Afterlife and Create a New Reality. I'm interviewing Nanci because the Sounds True author contacted me and said, "You've got to talk to Nanci Danison and have her as a guest on Insights at the Edge." And I'm so glad that this author did contact me. And here we are. Nanci, I'm so excited to learn from you. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, Tami.
To begin, let's give our listeners just a sense of Nanci Danison before 1994, just briefly, how you were manifesting in your life.
I had been reared as a Roman Catholic, 12 years of Roman Catholic education, 6 years of Methodist college. I have bachelor's degrees in biology and chemistry combined, and psychology. And then I went to law school. And at the time I died the first time, I'd been practicing law for 16 years. And I had never heard of a near-death experience. And at the time that I died in 1994, I didn't even know I was dead. That's how naive I was about the whole thing.
Now, you said the first time I died, and we're going to hear more about the fact that you've had several NDEs after this big afterlife experience that you had. What I'd like to know is, of the knowings that you received while you were in the afterlife, what has changed you the most in how you go about your life?
It's hard to pick one thing. I guess the most important thing to me, because of my Catholic background, was learning that what I had been calling God, and I now call Source, is not a being up there somewhere separate from me. I and the other members of my research group learned that Source, or God, is an entity composed of all of us, plus a core personality, a core set of character traits. Learning that I was, in fact, the God I'd been worshiping changed everything. It just took a huge burden off my shoulders.
Now, in this deep afterlife experience, you had a life review. And I think when a lot of us hear of something like a life review, we think, oh, we're going to review what's happened in our human life, the 50, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever that we've lived. But your life review went all kinds of other places. Tell us about it.
It started out as a review of Nancy's 43 years on Earth, and it included not only events, but sensations, memories, thoughts, dreams, hopes, every single piece of data that I had collected during Nancy's life, in addition to events. But as I was watching that, I realized, been there, done that. So I wasn't that interested anymore, because at the same time, I got this download of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of memories of lifetimes I had lived all over the universe and all different kinds of creatures and things. And I found that way more fascinating.
Tell me more about that. And how could all of this happen so quickly? Downloads of hundreds of lifetimes. Give me a sense of how much experience can be compacted so that you're having this flash before you, all of these different non-human even forms that you were and that you've been.
Humans live linear lives. We have created an artificial measurement that we call time, and we divide our lifetime up into these little tiny slots of minutes and hours and days and weeks. That's all artificial, and that only applies in human life because we want that. We want to be able to measure events in our life. Once we get out of the human body, there's no time. And particularly in the afterlife, many things happen at the same time. It's kind of like a super duper multitasking that we can do. We have multiple simultaneous levels of awareness. So we are capable of not only having a life review and participating in that, but also receiving downloads of memories of other lifetimes. And Tami, I remembered every single moment, every sensation, every piece of data, every thought, hope, dream, everything about every single one of those lifetimes, all at the same time. And I started reliving them.
Right. So this is mind blowing to me. I can't even really remember exactly what I had for breakfast without trying really hard. So the idea that you could have that much nuance and detail in so many different memories happening at the same time, that in and of itself, before we get into even what the actual memories were, I feel a little floored by that, Nanci.
It is amazing. And when you read most near-death experiences, the authors are not really able to give detailed descriptions because there are no human words. There are no human words for having simultaneous memories of hundreds of lifetimes at the same time. So it's very difficult to convey what goes on in the afterlife, particularly in a deep afterlife experience like I had. But I'm not the only one that recalled other lifetimes while they were in the afterlife. A lot of the people in my research group did too. It's something that we're capable of doing in the afterlife and nowhere else.
Now, you've referred now for the second time to your research group. What is this research group that you're a part of?
I just finished researching, looking for others like me. I've spent the last 30 years trying to find someone else, anyone else who had an experience like mine. I felt all alone. So I've read every near-death experience book. I read every research book. I've read research papers. And thank heavens, Dr. Jeffrey Long and his wife, Jody Long, created a database of near-death experiences called NDERF, NDERF.org, for the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation. And there are over 5,000 near-death experience accounts on there. So I started reading those. So altogether, I've read or heard on YouTube about 2,000 near-death and afterlife experiences. I found 31 others like me, 31 other experiencers who had not exactly the same, but they experienced the similar events and they learned the same things that I did.
Tell me a little bit when you say like me as distinct from everybody else in the database, what is that distinction you're making? What's like you?
The elements that my research group and I have in common are we experienced God or source in its raw form, its pure nature. No, religious icons attached, no human appearance, nothing projected onto it. It's just its raw, energetic nature. We also experienced that source is a collective being. It has a core, and then it has all of us, I call mental characters within its mind. So every soul inside every human and inside every other creature in the universe is a mental character within Source's mind. And everybody in my research group experienced that. And many of them, like me, experienced awakening to the knowledge that we are Source, we are God. Not the whole thing, but we are Source. And realizing, all of the information that it has, all the knowledge, all the almightiness that it has. The others like me also did not have the human trappings of many near-death experiences. We did not meet human relatives or loved ones. We did not see Earth-like scenery. There wasn't really anything Earth-like at all about it. Many of them had deeper life reviews. I didn't tell you one part of my life review, which is in a deep afterlife life review, you not only see and re-experience the events of the life you just lived, but you are able to get inside the others who were in that scene with you. You can see from their perspective, feel their emotions, hear their thoughts, participate in the scene from within them as well as within yourself. So you get a 360-degree perspective on what was going on, which part of the reason for that is to answer all your questions about, well, why did so-and-so do that? Or, why did I do this? Or, why this, why that? So you get all those whys answered in that deep life review.
This notion of meeting Source in its raw form, do you think we can have that experience while we're in a human body without having any kind of near-death or out-of-body experience? Is that available to us?
No. And I think the reason for that is because, as it was explained to me, the energy is so intense and so huge and so magnanimous that it would blow us apart to have that energy while we're inside a human body.
All right. So I've never had a near-death experience, and I'm presuming that many of our listeners also have not. So give us more of a sense as somebody who's had this huge, explosive knowing of Source in its raw form, what that's like.
I think one of my research group members expresses it best by saying that Source is a force field of love. And that's what it's like. What humans call love is actually the outer limits of Source's energy. That's what Source feels like. It feels like love, bliss, unconditional acceptance. And then Source's innate character traits are unconditional love, knowing everything, curiosity. Source is extremely curious, creative. That's why it created the universe. It's part of its creative inclinations. It is funny, has a sense of humor, and that's where we get our sense of humor, is directly from Source. It is warm, loving, open, expansive energy. It's just energy. It's so cool. There's just no way to really grasp it if you haven't been there.
And what did you discover about the purpose of being a human being, incarnating as a human, both in general and also for you specifically, Nanci?
I asked about that. I asked, why am I on Earth? And the answer was, because you chose to be. And then I received knowings that we souls get to choose, whether we want to incarnate, where, into what, it's all our own choice while we're in the stage that I call the incarnation stage. And I learned in the afterlife that humans, which are, animals indigenous to Earth, are considered to be some of the wildest, most primitive, hard to control, explosive, violent creatures in the universe. And Earth is considered to be this beautiful, wild, and primitive, and varied, and just has so many different things to offer, so many different scenes and scenarios. The two of them together present the greatest challenge that we souls can face. And so the ones who choose to come here are the ones with the most courage, the souls that believe they're up to the challenge, that believe that even though they're going to be inside a wild, violent creature, that they will somehow find a way to show unconditional love. And so it's just this huge adventure for us.
In your series of books, Backwards, you write about this nature of having almost two beings inside each of us, this human animal that you were just describing. We've come from this wild earth in our biology, and then this soul nature. And I'm wondering, here you are as a human being back in your body. Do you experience some sense of a dual nature of some kind? And how does that play out? And how do you experience that?
Yeah, you've expressed it beautifully, Tami. Thank you. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but my body is aware that I'm different than she is. She's aware that I can leave her and continue to live while she dies. I'm aware of my body and how she feels, what her emotions are, what her needs are. And so I spent probably 7 or 8 years trying to reconcile the fact that I'm aware of two beings in one physical space. And what I came up with was it's a joy to have somebody with me who loves me unconditionally. I love her, she loves me. We always have each other. We're never alone. We're the best of friends. We're the most intimate of partners. And I promised my body that I wouldn't go off and leave her anymore. So I'm hoping that the 6 times I've died will be the last until I go home permanently.
Now, just to clarify this for our listeners, in addition to this event that happened in 1994, this deep afterlife experience that we're using that language to describe, since then, you've had an additional 5, 6 near-death experiences. I mean, this is what's going on, Nanci? What's happening here? What has happened to you these other 5, 6 times? I've lost count.
Yeah, you've heard the saying that you won't die before your time. That's literally true. After my first deep afterlife experience, I was given a mission to come back here and tell anyone who would listen what I experienced and what I learned. And my experience, and that of some of the others in my research group, is that if Source gives you a mission like that, there's a group of spiritual beings in the afterlife who monitor your mission, because you won't remember. Once you get back in the body, you won't remember what you're supposed to be doing. So I have gone back into the afterlife twice. I died for various reasons and went back into the afterlife and met with my council a couple of times, so they could help keep me on track. Well, the second time I had a council meeting, they told me that Nanci was done, that she was very unlikely to survive. I had very low blood sodium, and I was home, and with nobody taking care of me. And they told me that I had a choice. I could come home, and it wouldn't be held against me that I hadn't completed my mission, or I could stay with Nanci. But if I chose Nanci, we would suffer for the rest of her natural life. And there were other reasons, but the predominant reason in my mind was, Tami, Source gave me a mission. Who lets down Source? I mean, how could I possibly default on that job I'd been given? So, and I also really wanted other people to understand that the things that we were brought up believing aren't necessarily true. That what is true is just so much more wonderful. So I chose to come back to Nanci, and we have suffered for her natural life so far. And then dying's not good for your health. It really does terrible things to your body. I've got a lot of brain damage, a lot of physical damage. So I think that kind of just, set me up for more health problems. So in, that time that I was in the afterlife for the second time, as soon as I came back, I called 911. I was taken to the hospital. I died again in the hospital in like in a hallway. I was laying on a gurney and waiting for an MRI. And my eye sat up out of my body. I just kind of lifted up halfway. Halfway was in the body and halfway was out. And I was looking around, and I saw the doctor from the ER running toward me with a bag of something in his hand. And he comes up and he says, I know what's wrong with you. It's low blood sodium. And he hung this bag, low blood sodium, or of sodium. And I was in the hospital for 3 days recovering from that. So that gets me to 4 deaths. And then in 2011, I developed stage 3 metastatic breast cancer. And I had a lumpectomy, and I died on the table during that surgery. And then a month later, I had to have a radical mastectomy, and I died on the table during that surgery. And in those 2 surgeries, I got out and was just like looking around the OR, wandered out into the hall. The first time with the first surgery, I was like looking through the door of the OR into the OR itself, and I saw this body laying there, and I went, oh, I'm supposed to be in there. So I jumped back into the body. And then the second time, I just got out and I was just watching the surgery and listening to what people were saying. And the next day, the anesthesiologist came to see me in my hospital room, and I told her what had happened. And she goes, oh, that's exactly what happened. I said, I know, I saw it.
So, Nanci, just to clarify, there's several things here, but one is when you say that you died in each of these instances, you mean that your heart stopped for a period of time? Is that how you're using that definition of dying?
The first time, I know that my heart stopped. I felt it stopping. The second time, I don't know why I died. The third time with the low blood sodium, I was alone. So I didn't have a cardiac monitor or anything. But I was told that, Nanci was dying, and I was in the afterlife. And then when I got to the hospital, the doctors told me that I was very near death. Then during the surgeries, the anesthesiologist told me I died.
Okay, and then this council that you met with who are helping you with your mission and you checked in with them, who is the council? Can you introduce me to the council members?
I had 2 different councils. The first one was a group of light beings I didn't know. And I don't remember how many were there. I just remember that they were essentially telling me, hey, you came here for a mission, get on with it. I felt like I was being smacked up the side of the head, get with the program, girl. And then the second council, the one where they told me that I had the choice, Most of the light beings I didn't recognize, but right at the very end of the meeting, two light beings came in, and for just 1 second, they had the faces of Nancy's mother and father who had predeceased her. And oh my gosh, it was so wonderful to see them again because it had been so many years. And then those faces were gone. And the very last person to come in, Tami, was a live human, was somebody I know. It was a friend of mine from the gym. And he put one haunch up on the, like that see-through table there in the meeting room. And he looked down at me and he said, "Surprise." And I was surprised because it was Jeff. And I didn't know human beings could be in the afterlife, but he wasn't dead.
Now, interestingly, when you were referencing that two of these beings had the face of Nancy's mom and the face of Nancy's dad, you were talking about yourself in the third person here. You didn't say had the face of my mom and my dad. You talked about Nancy. And I'm curious about that. Is that how you experience the body Nancy, the person who was there before 1994, or how would you say that?
Yeah, well, like I indicated before, I'm aware of both of us. Nancy is a physical matter human animal who did have parents. I'm part of source. I'm not physical, and I'm not, part of the physical world reproductive cycle. So I don't have parents. And unfortunately, I I just always see us as separate.
Okay. And when you met these light beings on the council, these ones that you didn't know, the ones that were unfamiliar to you, tell me what they looked like a light being. I see like columns of light or something, I imagine in my imagination, but I'm curious what you actually are pointing to, referencing.
They didn't really look like anything. I call them light beings for lack of a better term. The only physical like appearance that I saw were, Nancy's mom and dad and Jeff. The others were, I guess, a column of light pretty much covers it, Tami. You hit it right on the head there.
Okay, and so you were given this message that if you were to go back in and inhabit Nancy's body, you could fulfill your mission, but there would be a lot of suffering. And I want to make sure here in our conversation, which tens of thousands of people will listen to because we get a large worldwide listenership for Insights at the Edge. I want to help you fulfill your mission, Nanci. You're willing to suffer to fulfill your mission, and that's noble. What is it that you want to make sure we humans understand?
Oh gosh, there's so much. We are powerful spiritual beings. We are literally part of the God that we worship. We're not limited to these physical bodies. We're not limited to these physical senses. We have the ability to literally shape the physical reality that our body experiences through the source's power manifesting. We literally have the ability to get information directly from source by accessing what I call universal knowledge. So we are not powerless, sent down here, cut off from our creator, left to our own devices, to struggle to, try to earn our way to heaven. We already are heaven. We are source, which is heaven. And so there's no reason to fear death. There's no reason to fear life. There's no reason to worry so much like I did about always doing the right thing, about trying to be on the right path and about, making sure I didn't sin and, all those things that religions teach us. It's far more important to have experiences, to try to give to others, to try to love others, to try to open ourselves to everything this world has to offer. Don't lay on a couch watching football games. Get out there and live, have fun, and collect all these wonderful memories to take home with you.
You write about how Source has this curious nature and actually wants to experience through us. So when you say bring these memories home, you're talking about bringing our incarnated, curious experiences back to Source's home, yes?
Exactly. It is true that Source is all knowing, but part of that all knowingness comes from our experiences. That's how it knows what it's like to be a cowboy or a pilot or a centipede on some foreign, planet. It's from us gathering these experiences.
Now, you write and speak about something that you call the third epoch, and this is where we as human beings are at this time in our species evolution and what's happening here on planet Earth. And I think people would be very curious to hear your perspective on this.
Well, while I was in the afterlife the first time, I was so upset that nothing was like what I expected it to be like based on my Catholic religion. And I think to calm me down, Source showed me the history and future of Earth. So I watched its creation. I watched creation of the whole universe, but I also had a separate vision of Earth's creation and its future, centered around the idea of religions and how they got started and how they developed over time and what they were going to be like in the future. Part of what I saw about the future, I call the third epoch. The first epoch was what we think of when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, and then the earth re-terraformed, and a lot of cataclysmic geological things happened, and that epoch ended. So we're in the second one right now. And then I saw that we are transitioning at this moment into the third epoch. And the third one is far less populated, more agrarian, more centered on helping one another, sharing, showing compassion and understanding. And the population is just hugely reduced. Most humans will die off before the advent of the third epoch. Now, I want to emphasize that a lot of near-death experiencers, well, maybe not a lot, but I'm not the only near-death experiencer to see a future. You can't count on the future that we see in the afterlife coming true. What we see is kind of a projection of the outcome of the course that we're on. All we have to do is change how we manifest physical reality, change the course of events on Earth, and we'll change the future. So, so far, everything I saw has been coming true, but I don't know if the rest of it will.
Can you give me some examples of what you saw that has come true?
The tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, terrible floods, ice melting, new diseases, old diseases that have been mutated into ones that can now infect human and kill humans, violence, all the upheavals that we're seeing that are in the news every day right now.
Nanci, when I introduced you and I said that you had spent your early life as a lawyer and a litigator, how do you think that experience has played in to you being a messenger, if you will, of some ideas that I'm sure a lot of people are quite skeptical about and feel this is just like really way, way out? I mean, she believes she's two beings in one body and referring to her, self in the third person. Like, this is way, way out. But wait a second. She was a lawyer before this?
I've always kind of thought that one of the reasons why I chose slash was designated to be a messenger was because I've been trained to look for evidence, to weigh the evidence, to draw conclusions based on the evidence. And that's what I did in the afterlife. I didn't accept anything at face value. I was basically, the whole time I was there, saying, show me the money, show me the evidence, prove it to me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I had such a long, drawn out experience, is because I just wasn't buying it. And so I was constantly being, shown the evidence, the proof that what was happening and what I understood was real. And then I think the other reason is because I've been trained to speak to juries, to take complex concepts and put them into easily understood sound bites. And I think the two of those things together gives me the ability to, be a messenger. And I know it is hard to believe. Tami, it took me 7 years. I mean, I was there. I experienced it. I knew it was true. It was my life. I lived it. But after I came back, I still didn't believe it. It took me 7 years to reconcile my old religion with the new truths that I learned in the afterlife. And I did it kicking and screaming the whole time. So I don't blame anybody who doesn't believe me. I've been there.
Well, let me ask you this. I understand how revolutionary it must have been for you to see that a lot of the Catholic beliefs around hell and sin and all of that, like, no, none of that's actually what's happening here. Okay, that I think I get it. When you were reflecting, though, on this deep afterlife experience, what about the notion that, look, you had an experience. I believe you're accurately reporting on your experience, but that doesn't make it the truth. That doesn't make it how reality is. That's just what you experienced. Like people who report on their psychedelic journeys that they go on, and they say all kinds of things. And it's like, okay, that was your psychedelic journey. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a description of reality. What has given you this conviction that your afterlife experience is actually quote unquote reality?
A couple things. One is anyone who's been out of body or in the afterlife, anyone who's had a near-death experience will tell you it feels far more real than anything we experience in the body. And we make that determination of what's real and what isn't the same way as we do in the body. We can tell when we're having a dream. We can tell when we're having a hallucination. It's just a level of solidity, of reality that we're not capable of in the body. And everybody has that same experience of it being more real than human life. And then the other thing is the evidence. There have been, well, I think an old study said 8 million near-death experiences. I think one from maybe the last 10 or 12 years, something like 11 million documented near-death experiences. They all say the same thing. Their experience, their perceptions, the words they use are not identical, but the events they describe are the same. Near-death experience researchers can identify common elements in every experience, and those elements were in mine as well. So I have some of the elements of my afterlife experiences in common with 11 million other people. And as I said, I was looking for other afterlife experiencers like me, and I found 31 of them who had, the same events. They don't describe them exactly the same way. They learned the same things. They do describe those learnings the same way. And based upon that evidence and the fact that those 31 other people are absolutely convinced that what they experience is real, and I'm absolutely convinced that what I experience is real, that's my body of evidence that what I experience and what these others experience is true. Now, other people, one of the things I learned in the afterlife, among the 50,000 things, is that every life is unique. Every life is precious. Every soul has its own perspective. Every soul has its own experiences. And just like we have unique lifetimes in the body, we have unique lifetimes in the afterlife. But there are things in the afterlife that are true, whether you believe in them or not. And so, like when I went into the afterlife, and I didn't believe in any of the things that happened to me, I believed something completely different. I experienced the truth of what it's really like, not what I expected, not what I imagined, not what I was projecting onto the experience. I experienced the raw truth that I wasn't expecting.
One of the things I read about that you experienced was meeting 5 beings that you refer to as old friends. And at first I thought you meant friends that you knew when you were Nanci in a body on Earth, but no, they were different than that, cosmic soul friends, and you reunited with them in a certain way and merged with them. And I wonder if you can share a little bit more about that in this group. Who is this group of beings that you're a part of?
You're going to make me cry again, Tami. While I was there, I was calling them the light guys. They were they actually looked like kind of what you were describing with the column of light. They had, kind of like a head and shoulders shape, and then it was just straight down. They were see-through, but luminescent. They glowed from within. And so the light was coming from within them and radiating out. And when I first saw them, they were just shades of color that we can't see in human life. It would be translated into white. But then I realized that those colors were 5 beings, and I recognized them. I knew their names. They were my most beloved eternal friends. I've known them forever. We've loved each other forever. And we do have loved ones in the afterlife. They may or may not be the same ones we have in human life, but we do have those same closer relationships with some souls in the afterlife than with others. And these were my light guys. And when I saw them, I knew I was home because these were my people. And they welcomed me home, and they said, we ran ahead of the rest of us meaning Source, because we couldn't wait any longer. And they wanted to know everything that had happened in Nanci's life. And they told me telepathically that they just thought it was hilarious that I volunteered to come into human life at this point in time and to incarnate into Nanci, because I made a really terrible human in my past endeavors. And they said, when Source was asking for volunteers to come into, Earth life at this transition into the Third Epoch, and I stuck my hand up and said, hey, pick me, they just roared with laughter. So they were so curious to know how badly I'd messed up. So when I first met them, they got inside my life review with me, Tami. They literally, one of them stood beside me, and the other 4 were popping into the events of my life and living them as themselves or as me. And they could go back and forth doing that. You don't hear that every day in a life review. Mm-mm. Some of the others in my research group had the same experience, but they were just so curious to know what it was like.
You said that when you met them and they welcomed you, you knew their names. And you can tell, if I'm prying here, Nanci, you can tell me to back off. But would you be willing to share their names with us?
I would love to share their names with you, but I can't pronounce them. They're
Okay.
unpronounceable in English. My recollection is that in English, we would spell them with a whole lot of consonants and probably no vowels.
Okay. And do you have a sense of their presence even now that you're back here with biological Nanci? Or they're like, no, they're in a different
Yeah.
domain. They're not here now.
No, I can communicate with them. I ask for their help a lot. I ask them to send me healing. I ask them to send me energy, and they respond. But no, I don't feel like I'm connected with them anymore.
When I was reading in backwards about these light beings, it almost felt to me like you were describing a bigger being that you're a part of, source being the ultimate big being that we're all a part of, that we all are, but that this was like a grouping or something that's a soul being organism that you're a part of. Is that your sense?
It wasn't at first, but I think that's a really good description, and I'm glad you told me that. Um, when I first met them, I felt like they were all individual, and I was an individual. But they made it clear to me that we were going to go forward to source. We were going back into source, and that I had to learn how to merge my energy into theirs before I got to source, or I would be blown to smithereens. So I spent an entire phase of life in the afterlife, what I call vicarious living. I would merge my energy into one of them and live pieces and parts of the lifetimes it had lived somewhere in other places in the universe. And then I learned how to merge into two of them at a time, and then three of them. Eventually, I merged into all five of them at once. And once I was able to merge into all five of them at once, we went forward toward merger into the core entity of source.
I understand. Thank you. That's clarifying. Now, Nanci, when you talked about the third epoch and that what you saw at the time that you perceived it, that there would be far less population on planet Earth, I noticed I felt both sadness and fear at what you were saying, and started hoping that maybe you were a crackpot and that this wasn't true. And I guess I'm curious what you make of it and those emotions that come up for human beings in the face of something like that, of deep fear and deep sadness at thinking of going through that much of a population shrinkage and what would be involved in that, the amount of death and disease. I mean, it's horrifying to think of.
It is from the human perspective, but we need to keep in mind that every soul has a choice. You have a choice whether to stay here or whether to go home all the time, every time. No one dies before their time. No one dies before they're ready. And so if you can keep in mind that the people who do leave, who die off the planet, have made the choice to go home because there they have more power. They have more ability to help the ones left on Earth. They have more power to help with the geographic and the ecological and the various changes that Earth is going to go through itself, and to help give energy and healing to the ones who are left. So they're doing us a favor by dying. And then the ones who choose to stay are making the choice because they believe they can offer more while in the body. They believe they can help, create the new society, create new communities, excuse me, new lifestyles, help get humans through that transition. So both groups of people are really heroic in making their choices, and they're doing it for the betterment of all of us. So I think that kind of takes an edge off the sadness and the horror of it all.
I realize you're looking at this from a certain vantage point, but I can also tune in to someone who says, look, innocent children who die, they die in a war, they die in some other unfortunate event. They didn't choose that, really. They chose that. But you're saying from a soul level, you believe that it was a choice, is a
Yes.
choice.
I and others that have had, these expanded afterlife experiences learned that we choose to incarnate and we choose our incarnation host. And I learned that we also choose an exit strategy. So we come into life knowing how we're going to die. We don't remember, once we incarnate, but we've already got an idea of how we're going to exit this planet. The other piece from, the spiritual standpoint is that we set individual goals for ourselves. We incarnate into a particular species in order to have a certain kind of experience. If we have the experience that we want as an infant, we're done. We can go home. If it takes us 80 years to have the experiences that we want, we stay 80 years and then we go home. So for us, it's always a choice. It's always in furtherance of our own goals and in furtherance of our own wishes and desires. And while from the human perspective, it's horrific for a baby to die or a small child, or like think of the poor people in Ukraine and, in other places in the world, Israel and Gaza. And it's unthinkable that they actually chose, to suffer the way they did. But I chose to suffer the way I have. Our natural spiritual self is completely unselfish, unconditionally loving, unconditionally giving, unconditionally accepting. We think nothing of sacrificing an entire physical life because we love others, because we have that much love to give. And in the grand scheme of eternal life, an 80 or 90 years of human existence is like 2 seconds in eternal life because there's no time in the afterlife. So every soul is willing to give 2 seconds to save a species, to save a planet, to further the best interests of those that they love that are in the body. We're just a self-sacrificing part of source.
And Nanci, tell me again with your mission, what it is that you're sacrificing for. And there's a second part. How will you know if you've completed your mission? How will you know? I've been successful.
I'll answer the second part first because it's easier. I'll die and I won't come back. Then I'll know I've completed my mission. My understanding of my mission is to simply share what I experienced and what I learned in the afterlife the 3 times I was there. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm not looking for followers. I'm not looking for believers. I'm just the messenger and doing the best that I can to share. That's it.
To end, Nanci, one of the discoveries, one of the knowings you had was this nature of utter acceptance that Source has for our human lives, foibles, experiments. I wonder if you can speak to that, and we'll consider that the close of our conversation.
I believe nearly every near-death experiencer, afterlife experiencer, focuses a lot on the unconditional love and the bliss that they experience in the afterlife. What hit me more when I was there was the unconditional acceptance. Because I was raised to believe in sin, and that if you commit certain sins, you'll go to hell, and if you commit certain sins, you'll go to purgatory but never get to heaven, and that there was always a punishment for it. And I learned that that's the way humans think, because humans punish each other. And what I learned about unconditional acceptance is that it's not really possible during human life because of the bodies that we're in. These bodies are mortal. Their sole goal in life is to survive. They have to use judgment to determine what's safe and what is not safe. They have to compete with one another for precious resources. They are not really capable of unconditional love because survival's at stake. So all humans are innately selfish, self-absorbed, and self-centered. And that's fine. That's just the way all animals are. All earth animals are like that. And that's fine. And Source doesn't care that we're like that, because Source's purpose is to have all the experiences it can, including human experiences, including the horrible things about human life. And because we are Source, we're part of Source, we come here for the express purpose of having all these various experiences that Source itself can't have because they're so different. There cannot be any judgment involved. We're doing what we were designed to do. Why would Source punish us for doing what it designed us to do? There's no hell, there's no devil, there's no punishment, there's no judgment, because we're doing what Source designed us to do, having various experiences throughout the universe. Humans, on the other hand, do have to judge, because they have to know when they're safe. They have to know who's a threat, what activities are threats, what is safe to eat, what isn't safe to eat. And humans have a lot of innate fear, and that drives a lot of what they do. So it's unconditional acceptance. I don't think is a very safe goal for a human to have. And I think a lot of people who do offer unconditional acceptance end up being abused. They're taken advantage of. Humans are innately predators, and they prey on each other. And it's not done from any kind of sense of evil or lack of morality. It's just that they're animals. Now, we souls inside these bodies, we can take control. We can wake up to who we really are and take control of our bodies and stop them from doing horrible things. And we can express unconditional love and unconditional acceptance as the soul inside the body. But again, it's just my own personal experience, my own personal opinion, my own personal viewpoint that unconditional acceptance is something in the afterlife, not something we have here.
It's a beautiful sense that we could tap into, that we can appreciate, that exists for us to lean into, that unconditional acceptance of who we are. Nanci, it's been so interesting to talk to you. I have to say, people use that word interesting, and I mean it very seriously. I'm so intrigued and inspired. You've expanded my sense of what it means to be alive at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I hope you have the opportunity to read my new book when it comes out. It's going to be titled 32 Souls Who Met God.
Wonderful. Do you want to tell us? This is about your research group and
Yeah, it's about my research.
And all the notes that you've compared together. Say the title one more time.
32 Souls Who Met God.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Tami.
And if you'd like to watch Insights at the Edge on video and participate in the after-show Q&A session with our guests, come join us on Sounds True 1, a new membership community featuring award-winning original shows, live classes, community learning, guided meditations, and more with the leading wisdom teachers of our time. Use promo code PODCAST to get your first month free. You can learn more at join.soundstrue.com. Sounds True, waking up the world.